Ukraine will receive even more help from partners, and Russia uses the church for military purposes. Hello, this is Diana Kolesnik speaking from Kyiv, Ukraine, UATV English studio, in a weekly attempt to bring the hardest truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. The government of the Czech Republic has approved the allocation of funds for the country's initiative, which provides for the purchase of ammunition for Ukraine. This was announced by the Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala. According to him, in addition to the Czech Republic, about 20 countries have already expressed interest in joining the initiative. Among the latter, Slovenia and Iceland announced their contributions to Prague's initiative to purchase ammunition for Ukraine. Earlier, a number of countries announced joining the initiative. The Netherlands allocated €100 million, Norway $153 million, Sweden €30 million, Finland €30 million, Lithuania €35 million. Germany will cover the cost of 180,000 ammunition. In total, within the framework of the Czech initiative, approximately €1.8 billion were collected, which were urgently directed to pay for artillery ammunition. Thus, the Czech initiative to purchase artillery shells for Ukraine outside of NATO has ended and is currently awaiting delivery. Currently, the full amount has been collected for the purchase of more than 1 million artillery shells, which Ukraine should receive already in April. Corriere della Sera informed about it. At the same time, the German defense giant Rheinmetall plans to produce more than 1 million artillery munitions annually by 2027. And by the end of this year, 700,000 ammunition should be produced. New production facilities in Germany, Ukraine and Lithuania should provide access to higher indicators. It should be noted separately that countries such as Denmark, Finland, Sweden and Norway are also expanding and returning the production of artillery shells.
Everybody of us knows that we need more capacities in the defense industry, and especially for production of ammunition and spare parts and other things, and maybe even systems in the time to come. But still, now at the moment, the industry is thinking, what can we do together with Ukraine? Where can we do it? What is it? Is it only production? Is it also maintenance and repairing systems and so on? This is now starting on the side of the industry.
In addition, this week, Poland and Germany launched an armored vehicle coalition for Ukraine. Within the framework of the coalition, 4 syndicates have been created, each of which has been assigned different tasks. The supply of weapons and ammunition for Western armored vehicles, maintenance and repair, training of crews and technical personnel, working out the effective tactics of using armored vehicles on the battlefield. Something seems to me that Russian military production will not keep up with such a global pace. Russian occupation forces are increasing the use of chemical weapons against the defense forces of Ukraine. Since the beginning of 2024, 346 confirmed cases of its use have been recorded, said Ambassador of Ukraine to the Netherlands, Alexander Karasevich. This is for a second more than 6 uses per day. The ambassador noted that as of the beginning of March 2024, more than 8,000 cases of the use of chemical substances by the occupiers are being investigated. Usually the enemy carries out such attacks with the help of UAVs, dropping gas grenades of the K-51 type. At the end of January, it became known that the Russians used RGVO gas grenades, which contained the banned substance chloroxyphenin, against the armed forces. Later, it was also reported that the occupiers had used chemical weapons against the armed forces in the Tavria direction, probably K-51 grenades with chlorpyrene. It is important to emphasize that the use of chemical warfare agents is prohibited by the 1925 Geneva Protocol and the Chemical Weapons Convention. By the way, since 1997, Russia has been one of the 193 member states of the convention, which explicitly states that the development, production, acquisition, stockpiling, storage, transfer, and use of chemical weapons is prohibited. However, as always, Russia wanted to split on international treaties, rules, and conventions. Although as early as 2017, Putin declared that all chemical weapons had been eliminated on the territory of the Russian Federation. This is further proof that the Russians will break any agreements, and this also applies to any armistice treaties that the Russians are now trying so hard to spread among the Western world. Chemical grenades, which contain lye gas, became the main ammunition used against the enemy's armed forces. This is a combat poison gas with an irritating action based on chloropicrin. During World War I, German troops used concentrated chloropicrin against the Entente forces as tear gas. This chemical is absorbed into the body by breathing, swallowing, and through the skin. Although this substance is not as dangerous as other chemical weapons, it causes vomiting, dizziness, severe inflammation of the eyes, nose, throat, respiratory tract, and convulsions. The irritant also causes loss of consciousness and affects the skin. All symptoms appear suddenly, and with poisoning in a large concentration, a person dies in a matter of minutes. And since December, the Russians started using a new chemical grenade with chlorohexadiophenin, which is 310 times more dangerous. It is completely prohibited by the 1925 Geneva Protocol on the prohibition of the use in war and prohibited for use in combat by a 1969 UN General Assembly resolution. In December of last year, there was the first recorded case of the use of this poisonous substance in combat conditions since 1969. Russian crimes do not have a statute of limitations and carry the most severe punishment, including life imprisonment. At the same time, the Russians do not even try to hide their crimes. In April 2022, the representative of the Russian occupation forces in the Donetsk region, Basurin, called for the use of chemical weapons against the defenders of Mariupol in order to facilitate the Russian assault on the Azovstal plant. In December of last year, the Marine Brigade of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation admitted in its Telegram channel post that it had used chemical weapons, dropping K-51 grenades from drones on Ukrainian positions, in order to force Ukrainian defenders to leave the fortification near Krinky in the Kherson region. At the same time, the Russians use gas grenades regardless of the fact that there is a probability that the wind will change and they themselves may find themselves in a poisonous cloud. But as we have seen many times, the lives of Russians are worth nothing to their general staff. After all, such a number of mean assaults were only during the Second World War by Soviet commanders. 80 years have passed, but the principles have not changed. Not in military affairs, not in life. The Russian Orthodox Church has established the principles of its activities in a new document, the so-called Order 25 of the World Russian People's Council. In the document, the so-called special military operation is called by Moscow churchmen a new stage of the national liberation struggle of the Russian people. The war against Ukraine, the Russian Church is called sacred, and it is stated that the entire territory of modern Ukraine must enter the zone of exclusive influence of Russia. They called for the national liberation struggle of the Russian people against the criminal Kiev regime and the collective West behind it, which has been taking place since 2014. During the war, the Russian people with weapons in their hands defend their life, freedom, statehood, civilizational, religious, national, and cultural identity, as well as the right to live on their own land within the borders of a single Russian state. From a spiritual and moral point of view, a special military operation is a holy war in which Russia and its people, protecting the unified spiritual space of Holy Russia, perform the mission of the sustainer, protecting the world from the onslaught of globalism and the victory of the West, which has fallen into Satanism. According to Kremlin plans, after the end of the war, the entire territory of modern Ukraine must enter the zone of exclusive influence of Russia, The possibility of the existence of a Russophobic political regime hostile to Russia and its people on its territory, as well as a political regime controlled from an external center hostile to Russia, must be completely excluded. So, as we can see, Russians are not a Christians despite all the churches and believing in God. They call to destroy Ukrainians as a nation, as a state, as an identity. Destroyed each of us. I will also remind you that the other day Putin said that the war with Ukraine is becoming the main issue for all Russians. Therefore, if we want to exist, then defense against Russian aggression must unite us and force us to act immediately. And I'm talking about all the West. Do what is most important right now. Time for more on UATV English. You ask hard questions, we answer in easy terms. The question of the week has been voiced by our viewer using many symbols after that, and that question sounded like, do Russians believe in karma? There is karma, there is justice, no one cancelled it, and everything you do will come back. But for the Russians, regardless of what they believe in, karma, priest, who bless murderers, or Putin who sends them to their death, everything will come back to them, but not even in the future tense. Now it's already coming back. For example, they tried to destroy our energy system and blackmail Europe with freezing, but now they themselves whine that they are freezing. These winter frosts have led to huge problems with heating in Russia, so that they almost did not go to the rally because of it. The problems are already of such a level, but no one fired their power system, and Ukraine continues despite the shelling from the occupiers. The Russians blew up their own mines. Their planes are dropping bombs on their towns, and their air defense shot down their planes. Instead, karma in action. They wanted to isolate Ukraine and cut it off from the rest of the world. Instead, numerous sanctions not only limited Russians' access to their usual lives, but also cut Russians off from the civilized world. Coincidence? Therefore, regardless of whether Russians believe in karma or not, karma is already returning to them, and it will continue. That seems to be it for tonight and for the week. It was Diana Kolesnik in UATV English breaking the hard truth to easy terms for the hell-free world directly from Ukraine, as usual.